That is how you will 100% get your wife on board with your business. You say this, you say, I will do whatever it takes to provide for this family. I believe this business is the best option for our life and will be better than our current situation. If it does not work, I will go work any job, including a factory job, to take care of our family, no matter what. Today, we're talking about why your wife doesn't believe in your business and how you can make so much money that your wife actually wants you to quit your job and quit hers. So how can this be possible? Well, the answer is actually in your wife's hands. She has the answer to every single one of your problems that you're facing right now, if she indeed doesn't believe in your business. And interestingly enough, she can tell you exactly how to make your business work. And what's so wild about this is if you do what you need to do, if you listen to your wife, she'll tell you exactly how to make your business work. And also, what's so cool about that is if you can sell your wife, you can sell anybody and it'll be a piece of cake. So you got to think about it like this. Your wife is your business's first client. And you have to overcome all the objections that she has in order to even get to the point where you can work full time in your business. Then once you do that, everything else is a piece of cake because you'll be following the exact same blueprint as you're building your company.
Yeah, most of the clients that I've coached along this line, and there's been many because I coach entrepreneurs, and so most guys are working a day job and building their business on the side like you did.
Yep.
So, some of the common objections are, it's not, I haven't found that wives don't believe in their husbands and don't believe in the aspirations and goals of their husband. I think there's issues of security. There's doubts about how long it can take. There's also thoughts about the amount of work and effort it's going to take to get there.
Yep.
So there's some conflicting things that a wife goes through when young entrepreneurs like yourself say, man, I want to tackle this.
I want to quit my job.
Yeah, I
want to start this business.
and that's the motivating goal. Like, I don't want to do this 9 to 5. I want the freedom to run my own business. So, yeah, there is that I wouldn't say conflict, but it's that struggle to get on the same page so that you can move forward.
Yeah, this speaks to me really deeply because I was that guy about 7 years ago. I'm 28 now, and around 21 is when we got married, and right away I'm like, I want to start a business. I want to start a business. And like you said, it's true. My wife wasn't unsupportive of my business, and she didn't necessarily not believe in me, but she didn't believe in the business and the ability for it to make money at that time. And the first problem, you just brought it up, the first problem that I had was I wanted to quit my job. And that is a huge problem. That is one of the worst reasons to want to start a business. It might be a huge motivating factor, but it's a terrible reason to start a business. And if you're constantly trying to convince your wife from the standpoint of, I want to quit my job, I don't like my job, I don't like working 9 to 5, I. The problem is you're trying to get her to serve you by letting you do what you want to do. And I'm not saying it's bad for you to want those things.
Right.
That's just not how you sell anything on the planet.
And
it doesn't work.
And that's assuming your wife has a job.
Sure.
What if your wife doesn't have a job?
Even
what if
scarier.
she's a stay-home mom or something like that? It's even scarier. Great word. Because when you say, I want to quit my job, what it says to a wife is, I'm not happy.
Yep.
So that brings up a whole slew of emotions. It also says to the wife, like, did I marry a deadbeat? And is this guy just going to not, not try to better our lifestyles? So
Yep.
you're exactly right. I wouldn't go that route I wouldn't approach it with the negative, I want to quit my job. So let's talk about, here's some positive alternatives to that.
Yep.
How about this? How about, I want to talk to you about how I can invest some hours, and it's going to take sacrifices on both of our parts, but could we talk about agreeing to me investing some hours into our future that could really produce the lifestyle that we're looking for?
That's exactly, that's exactly the framework you have to base it upon, because a sale is when you're actually a salesman, a true salesman, and not a con artist or somebody who's trying to convince somebody. You are looking out for the other person's interest first. So you always want to approach it from like, hey, babe, you could even go like, hey, I'm grateful for the job that I have right now. I'm grateful for the money that it provides. I just think we could do more. And I've had this idea, and I think that I could buy a camera, start taking some photos, make some money on the side, and I think eventually I could turn that into an actual business that produces more money than we're making right now. And I didn't approach it like that when I was young. I was like, I hate this job. Like, I got to get out of there. It's so stressful. Because I was feeling the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking for her to relieve my pain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always a problem. Nobody buys from a desperate salesman. Whenever you smell desperation, you run, because you don't know what they're going to do. You don't know why they'll go to almost any length to get their pain relief that they need because they're desperate, right? And
so let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Okay. You said something. You said, I was looking to her to relieve me of my pain. How was she going to do that? What was your expectations?
I was hoping she would say, babe, I know you can do this. I believe in you. Quit your job right now. You go walk into your boss's office and tell him you're done right now. You buy that camera and you go after it. That's what I was hoping she'd say. And
didn't happen that way.
No, didn't happen that way at all.
Are you glad it didn't happen that way?
I'm extremely glad it didn't happen that way, because that's not how life works.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how anything works. She's my first customer, right? I had to convince her, not convince, but persuade. I had to persuade her that this is how a business is built. Now, imagine if she did concede to what I had said, and she basically would be like, yeah, you know what? I don't know exactly how it's going to work, but you go ahead and do that. Now, guess how I'm going to approach all my clients? Hey, please help me out. I'm trying to get my business going. Hey, could you please? And you see that all the time when new businesses start. They go, hey, I'm really trying to get my business started. It would mean the world to me if you would support my business by booking me to mow your lawn, take your pictures, do your video, blah, 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 blah. Like, it would mean the world to me. It would help me and my family get our feet off the ground. They don't realize that nobody buys things to help you.
Would it have put financial strain on your relationship?
It would put extreme financial strain. And that's why I said your wife has all the answers if you ask her the questions and then you take time to listen to what she says.
So you're glad you're glad she didn't say, "Oh, Joey, I'm so sorry you feel so unhappy. Go ahead and make yourself happy by getting out of a job that you don't like to do."
Yep, I'm so glad that she did not say that. That would have ruined us.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. You eventually moved into what you wanted to do, what you love to do, but don't you still have to do things within the context of this job that you don't always like to do?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, that's another part of life, at least in this life. There's going to be things that you don't love to do that you have to do, but that's what's cool is as long as they're part of the process and you know it's going to yield a result, you can get this energy towards it and you can knock it out because you know it just has to be done, but it's going to help yield that result. So like with when I was, let me explain that because that was a little bit convoluted, but specifically when I was wanting to quit my job, I worked at JCPenney and I made like $26,000 a year. And I really wanted to quit that job and start a media company. And at first it was me pouting, complaining, whining, begging, waiting, hoping Kayla would eventually one day, my wife Kayla would eventually one day just say, you know what? I do believe in you. I do think this could work. You go quit that job. Like I'm fully support. I wanted her to say that because that would have been easy, right? Then I would have been like, yes, let's go. And she didn't say that. Instead, I had to go a different route, and I had to say, so what would it take? Like what would I need to do? Eventually, I got out of my own way, but the desire was still so strong that I'm like, what would it take for you to say those things? Because like what I'm doing right now clearly isn't working. It's not getting you to say, go quit your job. So what would it take for you to say the magic words, go quit your job? And she's like, well, you have time in the evenings and you have some days off. And she's like, you got some birthday money. Like you could go buy, a camera. So I bought that camera sitting behind you there for like $400 with a kit lens that came with it and all that stuff. And she let me buy the camera with some birthday money, which already is wild. Like she's very good with our money and stuff like that, which is another great principle. A lot of wives are very good with keeping what you make, which is actually not a negative thing if you understand it and look at it as a positive. But she's like, she literally gave me the number. She's like, once you start making this amount consistently, that wasn't even that high either.
That was my question.
Yeah.
Because I think there's people listening to us right now, and it may be a relational disagreement, all right? Or it may be, what if it's just an individual person that's saying, how do I transition? That's what I want. I'm interested to hear how you and Kayla walked through that transition to a point where you agreed on a next step, then you agreed on a next step, then you agreed on a next step, right?
Exactly.
So step one was you had some extra cash that wouldn't cut into the budget.
Correct.
To get going with a piece of equipment. But then are there markers? Like were there markers to where you were shooting for as a goal to when you could both agree? Talk about that. Yeah,
there weren't like exact number markers, but she said, she literally just said, go prove that you can even make money with it.
Like even $1.
Yeah. Go prove that you
pay
can
the
even
camera
make money with it. And I'm like, I thought she was needing me to prove it to her, but I realized I really needed to prove it to myself because I wasn't fighting against her.
That's good.
It wasn't her who didn't believe in me. It was actually me.
Bingo.
And I believed that my time at JCPenney, because I would always tell her my day job, I said, I'm spending all my good hours on my day job. If I could just spend those good hours working on this business, I would be able to move it along so much faster. And she actually agreed with me on that. But she said, make sure it can do anything first. Like, can it make any money first?
Wow.
That was it.
That's wisdom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
you're blessed to have that.
Let me tell you, it didn't take very much for her to move fast.
Okay.
Because I just posted on Facebook and told people I was starting a photography business. And I didn't ask people to help me out. I just told them I was starting it. I just said, I'm starting it. And if anybody needed anything, let me know. Because I'd kind of learned that principle from her of like, I don't need to convince her and I don't need to convince my clients to work with me, right? I just need to tell them I exist and I need to do a good job. And so what I did was I reached out to some kids who I knew, had a lot of friends, and were maybe more popular, played sports, things like that. And I literally just said, hey, can I take your senior photos? And I literally told them, I said, if you don't like them, don't post them and don't tell anyone I took them. I said, but if you end up liking them, if you would just post them and tag me and say that I took them, that'd be all I need, no charge. And I did that, and people ended up really liking them.
So you didn't charge them at first?
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, and one of the people was a senior whose photos I took, and she ended up posting. She didn't like them all, but she liked some of them. She posted them, and people were like, "Whoa, these are good," right? And they were well-known people. And later on, she booked us to actually film her wedding, like later down the road, after we were already in a media business, and we didn't even do weddings anymore. But since she was one of our very first clients, I'm like, yeah, we'll do your wedding. And I was booked by the other person to do their engagement photos.
Okay.
Which was wild. The two people, so later down the road,
So,
I didn't charge them, but then later they paid me, which was so wild.
So it wasn't as much about a dollar figure as it was, she wanted to know, can you be successful
I got
at
booked
this?
for a high school reunion, and that was my first gig ever. They paid me $200. And mind you,
$200 for everything?
$200 for everything. Yeah.
Wow.
Which was a ton of money to me. I set the price, by the way. I was like, I'm going to say something super high, because I'm like, if they take this, I've got a business here. And I'm like, and I don't really want to do, like high school reunion stuff, but whatever. I'm like, it's paid. I didn't really want to do it, but I'm like, I'm going to shoot for the stars. I'm like, $200. And they're like, sounds good. Because their photographer that they had booked last minute couldn't make it. So it was just like a random thing. And I'm like, I'm going to shoot for the stars, $200. And mind you, my paychecks were like $600 every 2 weeks. So for me to make $200 for a 4-hour shoot and a couple hours of editing, that was a lot of money.
You were doubling.
Yeah.
Almost.
And Kayla was like, dang, you just made $200 in like 4 hours. I'm like, I know. She's like, maybe this can work. Right now, she's seeing that it's actually better. That's why I said, let me show you how to make so much money that your wife wants you to quit your job. Would you think $200 is so much money?
Well, you saw my response.
Yeah.
Like,
no.
No.
You don't think it's a lot, but she did. Because compared to, that's what's so cool about this is you don't have to make millions. You don't have to make tens of thousands. You don't even have to make thousands. You just have to show that it works. That's what's so cool. When I'm saying make so much money that your wife wants you to quit her job, for me, it was $200. She's like, could you do that again? I'm like, let's see. So I made another Facebook post. I let people know, hey, I'm doing some senior photo shoots. Then I charged $350. I was like, I'm shooting for the stars on this one. I was shooting for the moon before. Now I'm shooting for the stars. People agree at $350, it's game over. So senior photo shoot got booked. I'm like, hey, it's $350. You get 10 to 15 edited photos and 2 hours. And I got booked for one. And then another. And then another. And then another. And then another. And she's like, this is way more efficient money. Like, you're making your money faster here than you are at your job. And then came a day where I literally told her, I said, I think I'm supposed to quit my job tomorrow. I remember the night we'd just come back from a concert. I was like, I think I'm supposed to quit my job tomorrow. And she's like, I don't know. All the way up until me going to work, we were just like, not in agreement. And I finally said, you know what? I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to quit. I'm just going to go in. I was defeated, but I at least kind of knew in the back of my head, at least the business is starting to actually generate some money. And I'm like, man, I thought I got it. I thought I was there. I thought I was hearing from the Lord. And it gets to the point where it's 5 minutes before work. She drove me to work because we were still talking, crying, like, I was like, oh my gosh, I thought I did it. I thought I made it. I was so excited. I was so ready. And I'm like, you know what? No, I'm like, okay, if I didn't make it, fine. I just have to keep doing what I'm doing. I'll go into work. I'll clock in. I'll have a good attitude. And we get to the door. And I'm like, babe, I'm going to be late for my shift. I got to get in there. I'm not going to quit. Don't worry. She's like, you're supposed to quit. She's like, go quit. She's like, you're right. I'm like, I was like, are you serious? She's like, yeah, you're supposed to quit. And I went in and I gave it my notice. And the rest was history after that. Like everything just took off from there. And I believe it was the Lord, but I believe I also was supposed to quit at that time. Yeah, everything took off from there. But she had all the answers for me, which was the secret. You know, it's like,
Even the final one.
yeah,
Maybe it took that drive.
yep.
What do you think turned from the time you left your house to the time you got there? Because it sounded like you didn't think it was right to continue working, but it sounds like you felt like it was more important to be in agreement with Kayla.
It was. And that's all business, all sales. If you're not in agreement, it's not a real sale. A sale is agreement. And if she's not fully persuaded, we're not fully in agreement, it's not fully a sale. You can convince someone, and they can be, I'm telling you, you could convince somebody and they could concede or compromise, right? But I've heard it said, it's like, why are all people in marriage like, why is compromise the goal? They're like, sometimes you just got to compromise. Just compromise for your spouse. Compromise. I don't remember who said it. It might have been Michael Jr., a comedian, who's also a thought leader. He spoke at the Global Leadership Summit, I believe. He said, I don't like the word compromise. He's like, would you want to drive your car over a compromised bridge?
Right.
Would you want to go into a compromised building?
Yeah. And I think you've heard
No.
and you've heard me teach this principle, especially when it comes to marriage, is there's a difference between consent and agreement.
Yep.
Consent is saying, go ahead. Agreement is saying, I'm in agreement with you. And agreement has power.
Yep.
Consent does not.
Consent lacks.
Consent just gives the authority to one person. Agreement brings both people into the power of agreement that what you agree to will not fail.
Yep. That is why she had all the answers. I had to learn how to fully persuade her for her own reasons, not for my reasons. Her reasons are different than my reasons because she didn't work my job. She saw things from a totally different angle. I had to that's how you get in agreement, is when you agree upon her reasons and she agrees upon your reasons. Because the cool thing about it is you don't have to convince her to agree upon her own reasons. She already does. And you can't actually get her to agree upon your reasons. But what you can do to get 75% of the way there is you already agree upon your reasons. She already agrees upon her reasons. So if you agree upon her reasons too, now there's 75% agreement. There's only 25% left.
Yeah.
And we know that the law of reciprocity, if you believe in her, she'll believe in you back. Now, the wild thing is I was missing the point so much. We started the whole episode by saying, here's why your wife doesn't believe in your business. First of all, I didn't even believe in my business. And then second of all, I didn't even know what she wanted the business to do for her. So how could I ever imagine she was going to be persuaded and come into agreement if I never even listened to what she wanted? That is a whole problem with sales. When you go to sell a client and you're trying to get them to do something because you want to get paid, they'll never do it. That's what I was doing with my wife. I needed to understand what her reasons were, why she would be benefiting from us starting this business, what she was going to get out of it. Hear that. Once I heard it, She told me, I implemented it, I listened, and then she came into agreement. And it works like that every time because it's just a series of steps. That's how it works. Now, if she never wanted a business and she had no reason, no rationale, nothing behind that, it could have been a different story. But chances are, if you go to your wife right now and say, babe, I want to make more money for us than I'm currently making, and here's the plan, and I could see it really benefiting, so you can quit your job, you can stay at home with the kids, we can have nicer stuff. Pretty sure she's gonna come into agreement, but then you have to prove it.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think your story is a great story because you had a dream, you had a vision. Kayla wasn't against that at all. They're just, she needed security. She needed to know that you weren't, just going to drop everything. She wanted to see some factual evidence that this business could work. And at your young age, there's a little margin for error. It wasn't like you were making six figures.
No. Yeah.
So, but let's talk about that, what you just mentioned, because I think there could be people out there that actually need to present a little bit more of a strategic plan, meaning a plan for income. When I was in the world of network marketing, we were always told, and man, back in the day, you could make a lot of money, and especially if your product was good, and we had a product that was fabulous that people loved. But they always said, it was interesting. They would say, do not quit your day job until you're making almost 2 or 2.5 times what you're making in your day job. So I don't know where they got that equation. I don't know what it was, but I would imagine that at some point there's couples out there that are working day jobs but have a dream and a goal for their own business, and maybe a more specific plan is required, more dollars and cents at this particular date. If we get here, we get this. You're talking about health insurance. You're talking about a lot of different factors, right? How would you recommend going about that? What would you say would be helpful to somebody that needs a little bit more, because the transition might be a little more than a young guy grinding at J.C. Penney that could easily probably, the photography probably easily doubled what you were making in a short period of time.
Yeah. One other thing to tag onto that too is I never mentioned that my wife was working. She was a nurse in the ICU, which is the highest level of nursing. Very smart. She made quite a bit more money than me the whole time. She could have easily supported our whole life. And I remember we agreed that that's not what we wanted, though, right? And I remember the day when I came to her and was like, do you want to quit your job? Because we were making so much money that I quit my job and I was working in this business, and she started doing some work in the business. She's like, I kind of like working in our media business. She's very good with numbers, finances, etc. And she went down to working 1 day a week at the hospital because she wants to. And she's like, well, we're going to lose our health insurance. I'm like, well, let's get health insurance through the business. And she's like, well, then we're going to have to give health insurance to all of our employees. I'm like, then let's give health insurance to all of our employees. Let's be a company that does that. And she was kind of like, can we do that? I'm like, yeah, let's just do it. And I remember like the original day where I was making half of what she was making, and it was still a struggle to quit, right? And now I remember the day when I was able to tell her, like, do you even want to work your job anymore because it's stressing you out working so much. She's like, nah, I don't want to work that much anymore. I was like, then don't. And we had a daughter, and she gets to stay at home with her a lot. Now she works a lot still. She does a lot for the business. We're entrepreneurs. We're not going to stop working because it's part of our purpose, our life, our fun. We enjoy it. But it's more of a choice now than it was before. So to answer your question on having a strategic plan, I think you can get in trouble by having too strategic of a plan because you just don't know what's going to happen in business. But I do think you don't need a plan. You just ask your wife what she needs. She'll tell you.
That's the plan.
That's the plan. Just say, hey, what's the amount? Like, if there's conflict, if your wife's already in agreement, great. But if there's a conflict, like, what do I need to do? And actually listen. Don't make it like, what do I need to do? Just tell me what I need. Don't do it like that. Be like, what would it look like? Like, what would be a good position for us to be in for me to be able to spend all of my time on the business so that I can grow it even faster? And that was the magic question that I asked that finally unlocked the door, was like, hey, we're making some money in this business. However, I'm spending all of my good hours at JCPenney working for them, making $16 an hour, which back then was a lot of money. It was almost double minimum wage. And I'm like, what would it take for me to be able to give all my good hours? Because you see how much we're making with just me doing this business part-time. I believe that if I was able to give all my good hours right when I wake up, work on it all day, that I could speed the process along by like 5 to 10 times. I was like, what would it take for that to happen? And she actually started to be like, that makes sense. So you don't have to completely replace your income before you quit your job. I think that's a trap a lot of people get in. They go like, them and their wives, or they agree to some bad terms, and they basically say, hey, once you're making at least what you make now or double or whatever, then you can quit. Now, the problem with that is that's really hard to do when you're only working at it part-time and you're tired after your day job. And can it be done? Yeah. But I think there's a little bit of a risk to be taken where you go, babe, I've proven the concept. Math says if I spend more time on this, we'll make more money. I just need to put in more time, right? And if she sees that your miniature version of the plan, your part-time version of the plan's working, I think you have now built up a little bit of a bank account where you can go withdraw and say, hey, believe, like, trust, like, we could do this. And the other thing I said to her too was, if I fail, I'm employable. I'll just go back and get another job. Like, we're not going to starve. I said, I'm never going to make it where you have to support this family.
Yeah.
I'm never going to put that burden on you. I think this is the better choice. But I literally told her, I said, I'll go work in a factory if I have to, if we need to pay our bills. Like, that's not going to be a problem. But I was so motivated by not having to have that be the option that it was such a powerful push for me to actually make the thing work. Because it's not a guessing game. It's just talk to more people who need what you do a good job, charge a right amount, and you're good to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And you never turned back. You never looked back.
No.
She never came and said, Joey, go back to JCPenney. When she saw
JCPenney's out of business. Actually, our store closed like a year later.
And isn't that interesting
Yeah.
how we put security in something that we think, because it's corporate, it's going to be there forever? Because you hear that, right? You hear, well, what if your business, what if people don't want photography, or what if people don't want coaching, and well, what if people don't want JCPenney?
They don't. It closed.
They closed.
That store closed a year after I quit. So had I stayed there for the security, I'd have been a year behind.
Yeah. False security. That's what it is.
There's no security inside of another man's business. I've actually heard from my economics teacher, he said, people who always survive depressions and recessions are business owners and landowners because they can make decisions to solve problems. If all you are is employed, which is not bad to be employed, I think employment is a great training ground, but ultimately I believe you should have a skill that you can monetize yourself and you can trade that's valuable, right? And you can learn a lot of that being employed. So I think employment is great. But there's the factor of if you don't control your writing your own paycheck, then second a business needs to downsize, it's not even personal. It's just, it's riskier. That's another thing too. You take that and you go to your spouse and you go, hey, like, what if JCPenney went out of business? Like, what would happen then?
Well, what I like about this podcast, and thank you for being open, sharing a real life story of what you walk through. And what I like about this is that I have several clients right now that I'm coaching through how to eventually get to their own business, but they're working, they're getting a paycheck, working in the daytime and creating their business on evenings and weekends and whenever they can. But what you brought out, which I think is so valuable, that it's not just the amount of time that you have to spend in, it's not just the business strategy. There's an emotional side to this that can be a saboteur. You know, it can mess with your head, it can mess with your relationship.
Yep.
And you have to have a strategy. You have to have a strategy to get through that tough part, that hard part, or that part that keeps you from taking the next step. And that's what I'm seeing. I have a client right now that's making progress, and I just keep pushing. But what I noticed is the delay between where he's at and the next activity, it's not physical, it's emotional.
It is.
It's right here.
I know how to alleviate that. You got to have a fake plan B. A fake plan B means it's not really a plan B. It's just what you tell people.
So ultimately, you'd probably be willing to do anything if photography business didn't make it. But let's be really honest, you had no plans on going to a factory like that. That's not
I'm
even.
glad you picked up on that. I'm like, is this going to come across? But that's exactly right. I had no plan B, but I had a fake plan B. And I just knew it wasn't going to have to happen. But for the people who weren't quite where I was yet, they needed a plan B. I just didn't. And sometimes they say, no plan B, burn the ships, blah, blah, blah. That's great for you.
Right.
But some people need a plan B because they're not where you are yet. So give them a fake plan B.
And banks need plan Bs. They'll ask, right? Oftentimes.
They do. Yeah, exactly. But give them a fake one.
Exactly.
That doesn't mean you're lying.
Right.
It just means you don't have a plan B.
And it could be a viable option, worst comes to worst, but you know worst is not coming to worst.
Yeah.
In your mind, best is coming to best.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't need a plan B, but some people do. So give them a fake one. And I mean lie. If your business collapsed, you have to know internally that you are the guy that's going to take care of your family.
Right.
You just know that there's so many options before that happens that it's almost impossible for that fake plan B to have to come to pass. But give it to them anyway. That is how you will 100% get your wife on board with your business. You say this. You say, I will do whatever it takes to provide for this family. I believe this business is the best option for our life and will be better than our current situation. If it does not work, I will go work any job, including a factory job, to take care of our family, no matter the cost to me.
Phew.
That is how you do it.
That's great. That's not only a good wisdom and a good plan in the context of that, because I coach every area of a person. I see how it builds trust in a relationship, trust and coming together, the power of agreement that we've talked about. So there's a lot there. That's a great word.
The biblical difference between a contract and a covenant. I've heard it explained really well by Myron Golden, and I will quote him a lot because I listen to him every day. But the biblical difference between a contract and a covenant is this. A contract is a signed document, an agreement between two parties who have a mutual distrust of each other. A covenant is an agreement between two parties who are basically saying, if I do not fulfill my promise, and essentially in the Bible, they'd kill an animal. They'd shed blood for a covenant, it'd be a blood covenant. And they'd basically be saying by that, if I do not fulfill what I said I'm going to fulfill, let what happened to this animal happen to me. Like, I'm going to do this if it means my death. That means you trust a person so much that you'll fight to the death to do whatever it takes for it to happen. That's the difference between a covenant and a contract.
And it might be an oversimplification, but this is the way I've communicated it. You're right. A contract is a safety precautionary thing because
It's a plan B.
We're not sure if there's integrity and trust. A covenant is coming together to say, till death do we part. We're in this no matter what. Yeah.
That is how you take your wife from not believing in your business and yourself to believing in your business and making so much money that she wants you to quit your job and wants to quit hers. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Rich to Wealthy. We hope that you're blessed by this episode, and if you have any questions, let us know in the comments. I comment back on everything that I can. Right now, we only get like 10 comments a video, which is perfectly fine, so I can comment back to you, every single one of you. Love to hear from you, hear from where you're listening, and hear what stood out to you the most so we can keep bringing you great content. Again, thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Rich to Wealthy. We'll see you on the next one.